I assume, since you're watching a book to show episode, that you have all read the books. And since you have all read the books, you've experienced the feeling of expectations, of knowing what's coming, not always, but often on HBO's Game of Thrones. For many of us, this feeling has permeated most of the, at this point, 5.5 season long run. I said most, not all. Though we're still seeing familiar things from the books like Arya's arc and Euron, and things not yet in the books, but that we basically expected in some form or another, like the return of Jon or Daenerys winning over the Dothraki. But season 6 is flipping the book reader experience script. Instead of having expectations for the show based on what we've read, we're now starting to have expectations for the books based on what's in the show. Part of what we're here to do is to undo that relationship where appropriate and strengthen it where not. We're going to have a lot of fun breaking down this episode. We're also going to unpack the notion that what's on the screen will be on the page and with as many specifics as possible. Although certainly some things on the screen will be on the page. But for example, the big moment in this episode, the confirmation that Hodor derives from the phrase "hold the door" is directly confirmed by George R. R. Martin, but only the meaning of the name, not the circumstances, not the setting. Only the name. So there's no reason to believe A Song of Ice and Fire's version of Hodor's name origin has anything to do with an escape from the cave, with being touched by the future Bran in a moment of desperation. After all, the book version of the cave is immensely vast and probably doesn't have a door of any kind, right? So we should not expect that what we saw in this episode, at least in that scene, is going to be on the page. But it's sad to say that Hodor may be fated to die in a somewhat similar fashion in the books. And Summer, too, these things are far from certain. Summer's death in the show has as much to do with cutting a little budget as anything else, though it was a clever way to show that summer has ended. Hodor, on the other hand, was an immensely popular character and became larger than life in TV fandom. After having been a favorite in the book fandom for so many years, his popularity on TV was not a surprise to book readers. And it's fitting that the episode he went out on is so far rated by IMDb voters as among the top 3 or 4 Game of Thrones episodes to date. That's extremely strong, like strong enough to hold the door against a horde of whites strong. So it's the halfway point of season 6, HBO's Game of Thrones. Unfortunately, despite the epicness of this episode, we do not have our usual group of contributors. We still have Radio Westeros, but only half the team. Say hello, Lady Gwyn. Well, glad to have you back.
Hello. Good to be here again.
Yeah, but we're not short on things to talk about, so the two of us will be able to cover it no problem. I already did a 3-hour show episode with Sean on Monday, and we're doing a Q&A tomorrow, so look for that. It's on Google+. We posted it on Twitter, and it should be easy to find. It's going to be at 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. So that just goes to show how much there is to say about this episode. We're also, I need to mention that Radio Westeros, not just Lady Gwyn, but Yoke Boy, myself, and Ashea will all be at Balticon, along with a lot of other cool people like Jeff Hartline of Wars and Politics of Ice and Fire, and George R. R. Martin himself, speaking of cool people. And there's going to be a reading. It might be something new. It might be Ariane 2 again. We'll see. So we will be reporting on that. The group of us will be doing a panel at Balticon. So if you're in the area, come on down and check out our panel, a podcasters panel. Jeff Hartline, Brendan Beefish will be moderating it. We'll be talking about podcasting and A Song of Ice and Fire in general. So, and if that recording goes well, we'll be posting it as well. So we'll see how that goes. Maybe we'll be putting a bonus episode up. Never have we had an outpouring like after this episode on Sunday. The door is by far the most response generating, email generating, Twitter tweeting generating episode we've ever seen. Never had so many emails, never had so many comments as we've had. So that comes with a caveat. We've tried to weave in as many questions and take as many questions as we could. And like I said, doing a show only Q&A tomorrow where more of those questions are going to be answered and raised. But I apologize if your question did not make it into either show. Because there's just so many of them. We just simply don't have time to address them all, to get them all in the show. It's just overwhelming, but it's also awesome because it shows how much you all care about this. And I always like to see the fandom come alive as it always does during Game of Thrones TV season. Now, speaking again to the name, Hold the Door, a few people did guess correctly that that was the origin of the name well back in advance. Multiple people. The oldest we saw was 2008, and it looks like I have a gap in my notes. I forgot to look up who that was, so apologize to that person. Maybe I'll look that up for the Q&A. But I suspect there may be people who've guessed it even farther back. After all, this series has been highly, highly scrutinized since it has existed, and it's existed since 1996. So not to take credit away from anyone who figured it out on their own, just because you figured it out in 2008 on your own and someone else may have figured it out before you, doesn't mean you stole it from them. You can still arrive to that conclusion independently, and it's very perceptive regardless. So pat on the back to anyone who figured that out in advance. And before we get started in earnest, a couple quick things. A shout out to our patron Kingsguard, Sir Andrew the Prophet, and as well as a shout out to the island of Bermuda in the Caribbean, who we've gotten a lovely, very generous donation from. Not from the entire island, because if the whole island gave us a donation, I might be retired right now. But thanks in general to the island of Bermuda. Very, very generous donation there. So let us get started. As I said, there's so much to talk about. We will probably go over 2 hours today, and that's just fine. We don't want to do that typically, but on rare occasions like this, it does seem appropriate because there is so much to talk about. So Lady Gwyn, let's talk themes. Let's talk about some overarching themes as we usually do to start the episode, and I'll ask you in general how you felt about the episode.
Mm-hmm. In general, I liked the episode. It was a lot of emotion. I was in tears in probably every location except for Marine. Very different kinds of tears, tears of all the different kinds of feels you can possibly have. But yeah, I thought it was a very emotional episode.
Yeah, we heard a lot of that. We've heard a lot of people talking about how emotional it was. It certainly was for us as well. And there's so many, back in the day, I'm sure a lot of you guys remember there were reaction videos to the Red Wedding or the Purple Wedding and some other things. Well, there are even reaction videos to this. Now, it's unlike the Red Wedding. There weren't book readers knowing it was coming, preparing to record their friends. No one knew this was coming. But the idea of recording people's reactions to Game of Thrones is out there now. And I've seen a few scenes of people in bars or in groups, just, people hanging their head, shaking their head, just crying, like guys trying to conceal the fact that they're crying, women openly weeping, etc. Just strong emotional reaction. So good job, TV show. You guys really got us with that one. When you can evoke emotions like that, it doesn't matter how critical you can be of the scene before or after. If they can get that kind of reaction out of people, they succeeded. The episode is 9.8 on IMDb, and that's a win, no doubt. So theme-wise, having to do terrible things to save yourself is kind of a theme here, or your family, or your culture, or your race. The Children of the Forest did a terrible thing to save their culture, or their race. Bran had to do a terrible thing to save himself, etc. So, and maybe someone like Jorah is going to have to do something terrible to save themselves. And Arya is being asked to do something terrible or else. So it would kind of be to save herself. We'll see how she reacts to that. There's also a lot of scenes where our emotions are kind of pulled in multiple directions at once. We're experiencing multiple, almost conflicting emotions. Hodor scene, obviously, there's all sorts of emotions in that scene. It's sad, it's epic, it's anxious, it's got us on the edge of our seats. But also, for example, the play. It was hilarious, that play. But also Arya was just struggling, and it was horrible for her. And so we felt sorry for Arya while we're laughing at these hilarious lines. So another good job there of splitting our emotions into two things that don't really work together, yet still they happen together. So let's go, as we often do, we will start at the wall. That's what we've done just about, I think, every episode this season, because every episode has started at the wall. So there you go. Sansa and Littlefinger with Brienne. Lady Gwyn, take us away on this scene.
Well, I really like this scene. Yeah, I have a soft spot for Sansa and Littlefinger. So this scene, to me, was Sansa showing her strength. Littlefinger's made a horrible mistake. She confronts him and really seems to completely reject him. But she does allow him to leave. So perhaps, leaving a door open.
A door. Okay. Yeah.
An open door, not holding it open. But I did find that there was maybe a little bit of pathos here with Littlefinger. We talked about finding pathos in the character in our Littlefinger episode, or two-part episode that we did recently. He made a rare mistake, and I felt he was genuinely sorry. I thought it was really supremely acted by Aidan Gillen. He seemed possibly even submissive to Sansa.
You can't expect that he wanted her to be tortured. I can't think that doesn't really it's hard to see how that would fit his plans,
Yeah, no, it felt genuine to me. So I don't think that Book Littlefinger is going to make this sort of a mistake. I think the only mistake Book Littlefinger is going to be making is underestimating Sansa, who I expect will be instrumental in his downfall. The pupil surpassing the teacher. And, I think we're kind of being shown that here, where he's being a little submissive to her. So the outcome is going to be kind of similar, even if the way to get there is pretty different.
Yeah, and by the way, you basically frame it as the teacher being surpassed by the student, and that is sort of the theme of this episode as well. We have Bran moving on from his teacher. It wasn't surpassing his teacher, but he had to move on kind of unexpectedly. Same thing for Arya soon, maybe not yet, but it's being foreshadowed that that's coming. Mm-hmm. And here we go again, but Sansa and Littlefinger. So this is a theme for the Stark kids in general. Now, I guess Rickon's being left out of that. And even Jon is sort of starting over in a sense. He's not Lord Commander right now. Yeah. So that's pretty neat. Yeah, and I definitely agree with you, Lady Gwyn, that Book Littlefinger won't make this mistake. And it wouldn't be plausible for Book Littlefinger to make this mistake at this point, because Ramsay is too well known at this point in the Dance with Dragons. It was plausible to me, maybe a stretch, that Littlefinger didn't know about Ramsay in the show. In the books, it wouldn't be plausible because Ramsay's well known what he does now. Manderley talks about it. It's just well known in the North. It just wouldn't be plausible for Littlefinger for that to go unnoticed in the book. So I definitely agree that will come out differently. So there's several different groupings of scenes at the wall here that all relate to each other, obviously. We have Jon and Sansa and Davos with Ed, Tormund, and Melisandre present, but Ed, Tormund, and Melisandre don't say anything. It's really Jon and Sansa and Davos having the discussions. Davos brings up going to the Manderleys. Get excited. That could happen. That's, of course, the North Remembers chapter in A Dance with Dragons is the most popular chapter according to Tower of the Hand voters. TowerOfTheHand.com, by the way, great website for Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones resources. And their chapter voting has a lot of people have voted on every chapter that's ever been written, and that is the #1 chapter. So it makes sense that the showrunners, if even remotely aware of that, which they might not be, but if they are, of course it would make sense to bring it in. Even if they're not, when they read that chapter, I'm sure they recognized how epic it was. They're fans of the series. They probably loved that chapter. So I'm sure they wanted to get it in there. So hopefully that's there. Brienne going to the Riverlands is being talked about openly now. And that's something we kind of predicted during the season. It seemed there were some trailer scenes that sort of gave that away in advance. So we saw this coming. And that's a great thing to look forward to. Hopefully we'll see the Blackfish, things like that. It does seem likely. But perhaps more immediately relevant, given something that's happening, we're talking about things that we don't know about yet, but immediately we have Sansa lying to Jon about how she found out about Riverrun. That's very interesting. Is it a sense, do we get a sense that Littlefinger's words had an impact on her, that he sowed some doubt? Or is it just Sansa's proximity to Littlefinger for so long, making her suspicious of anyone? It's kind of hard to say. Maybe she just doesn't want to involve the Vale army, and if she brings up that those soldiers are there, she wouldn't be able to talk anyone out of bringing them up. So I don't know. What do you think, Lady Gwyn?
Well, I have some thoughts on this. I will say that I did talk to Yoke Boy, and he wondered if Sansa didn't want to admit that she turned down an army, in that council, because they're talking about how kind of desperate they are for supporters, and she knows about this army in camp ready to help, and she basically sent them away. So it could be as simple as that. But on the other hand, it could be showing that she's learned from Littlefinger. They could be setting up conflict with Jon, or the possibility at least that someone is trying to create one, like Littlefinger, or Eddie, who could be other people as well. Littlefinger makes that half-brother comment. And then in the council scene, I thought it was interesting. Someone pointed out that Jon doesn't have the Stark name. I think it was Davos. And Sansa was very quick to reply, but I'm a Stark. And then Jon kind of gave her a look, and she said, oh, but Jon is obviously Ned's my father's son.
Yeah.
Meaning to that, she's sort of thinking she wants to promote herself as the Stark. I don't know, where that's going to go. In the books, Jon does protest that Winterfell belongs to Sansa by right, at least in his opinion it does. So I'm not sure this conflict is going to go anywhere on his part.
Yeah, it's interesting because, does it truly, in the books it's a little murkier. Does it truly belong to her? Well, we know that it would actually go to Bran and then Rickon, according to the normal rights of succession. What does that mean? Rights of succession? What
is that?
What's that mean? What's the rights of ascension? What's that mean? But does it truly belong to her? What I'm referring to is, and hats up to watching her, Anthony Gonzalez, did Robb invalidate her rights in the books? He didn't want to name her heir because she was married to Tyrion. He just did not, under any circumstances, wanting Winterfell to pass to the Lannisters. So, A, did he actually go through with pushing her out of the line of succession? Or B, does it even matter? Is Robb's will ever going to come up? Is anyone of importance ever going to raise that issue? Those are open questions that we can't really answer. Really good to think about, though. Another really interesting thing that's going on relating to Jon being Ned's son, et cetera, and the talk of that is we book readers are all pretty much sold on R plus L equals J. If not sold completely, we recognize it as, a very likely possibility. There's a few people out there that are not so certain, but, the majority of people believe that. I certainly believe that. And they're really bringing that up to the fore with Sansa making the wolf mantle for Jon that looked like Ned's, and Jon wearing his hair like Ned. So I think that they're bringing back this whole Ned's son thing to surprise people and say, no, he's not Ned's son, he's Rhaegar's son. So I think that's where this is headed. They're reminding us of that so they can flip it. And that's pretty clever. I like it. They're doing it all at once. Like in a lot of ways, I like how the show is handling this hidden birth mystery in a, I really love how that's done in the books as well, but having it all kind of come up near at the same time, it makes sense in a sort of succinct efficiency kind of way. It's a good way to do it on TV, in other words. We also get Lord Commander Ed. All right. We're all happy about that, right? We talked about that. We got hyped about that. I know Yoke Boy was excited for that. Speaking of Yoke Boy, reason he's not in this episode is traveling to the States. He's going to, like I said, he's going to be at Balticon, made the trip over the pond from England, and that's exciting. We're all going to meet in person for the first time. Another positive of this episode is, especially for those suffering from Ramsay fatigue, is that he wasn't in this episode. They're holding on to him. There's not a lot for him to do in the meantime. He's going to, do his stuff at the end of the season, I suppose. We haven't seen him deal with Rickon just yet. And I'm not eager for that. I'm sure you're not either, huh, Lady Gwen?
No, not really. I was happy that we didn't have any Ramsay this episode, but
yeah. Who's chomping at the bit to be like, yeah, what's Ramsay going to do to Rickon? I can't wait to see.
Right.
Yeah, it's just better. Let's just have that happen off screen. We got enough of Theon's torture, and we used all that up. Let's move on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so real quick, since we're leaving the north, there's less to talk about in the north than usual. Well, we have much to talk about north of the wall, but at the wall, less than usual to talk about. This is a big setup. Jon going south. Clearly, Jon indicates, by the way, important point. He indicates that he's coming back. He tells Ed, don't let the wall go down while I'm gone, which could be foreshadowing, like real sneaky. Maybe the wall will go down while he's gone. That would be something else. We'll talk about a very strong theory towards that later in the episode relating to what happened with Bran and Night King. First, a shout out to our Northern champions as we move away from the North. Patreon supporters who have designated themselves champions of the North, such as Jay Wilson, Winter's King, Stephen Hill, Bastard of the Crag, Sir Stephen, the Hammer of the North, Small Paul of House Buckley, the Scourge of Skagos, Winter's King, Nico the Unknown of House Mormont, Bear Life, Brandon Redbeard of House Brewer, Sworn Alesmith to House Stark, Grandmaster of the Zithomanthers Guild and Keeper of the Buzz, and also Lady Airdross, Mother of Wolves. Thanks, folks, for your support on patreon.com/History of Westeros. Onward, so much to talk about. Let us go to Bravos. Let's go to Bravos. We'll stick with the Starks for now. Arya and the waif. We get a little bit of a change in the history of Braavos as it pertains to book to show canon. But first of all, we're brought up, Waif brings up something very important that relates to this whole Faceless Man origin thing, which is that the Faceless Man originate amongst slaves and commoners and people who are already sort of born into this whole no one state, as a manner of speaking, rather. Whereas the Waif confronts her, calls her Lady Stark, saying you'll never be one of us. And as Jakin says, she has a point. And we all know, as both readers and watchers, that she's probably right. The Waif probably is right. Arya is not giving up her Starkness. We saw her hide Needle. We know from her book point of views that she's learning how to skin change while at the House of Black and White and doing all these other things and keeping her secrets in her heart, etc. But it's still very interesting the way they're playing it out. Arya and Jakin in the Hall of Faces, again, this is where they actually have this discussion about the differences and how the Faceless Men founded Braavos and show canon, apparently, whereas in the books, we're just told that it was slaves. So, it could be the same. It's just that we have less information in the books. Maybe it was the Faceless Men who founded Braavos, but it's just told to us in the history books as escaped slaves, which would be an accurate description, just, a less descriptive term that's still accurate. There's also this knowing your target issue, which is, we're not sure if the Faceless Men care about that in the show. And watching her, Nathan Ledbetter pointed this out, that of course it's important in the books that a Faceless Man does not target someone that they know. They're not allowed to go after people that they know personally. So the show hasn't touched on that much or at all. So I don't think they're going to bother with that. But if they do, well, then she can't go after Cersei. And maybe we're being set up for that because she's being told to target fake Cersei, which is an interesting parallel. Lady Gwyn, what did you think of the play? I thought the play was awesome. What about you?
Yeah, I thought it was very well done. It was hilarious. There's some good moments. There were, the emotional moments of watching Arya observe when her father came on stage. And by the way, one of our listeners pointed out that she was wearing a blue flower in her hair. So whether that was
nice.
Full attention to detail. That was
very
cool.
Nice. I did not see that. Did not see that at all.
I had to go back and watch it, but Mary Harrison is very.
Oh, Mary Harrison. Yes, good job, yes. Mary
yes.
Daisy.
Yes. So.
That's a really good catch.
That was a good catch. So.
And of course, because Arya is supposed to most be like Lyanna out of all, she's the one that reminds Ned of Arya with her willfulness and her, desire to learn how to fight and all that stuff and be good at it too. And she looks like her too. That's the other thing. That's as we're told in the books. The actresses in the show don't really look that similar, but in the books they're supposed to look a lot alike. Now there's a little underlying coolness in this scene. Not only was this play really well done and funny and heartbreaking at the same time, but there was some meta in this scene. There were that one actor after the scene backstage says there are no small parts. Well, that's a meta comment because these are all fairly known actors in England. They're maybe not as well known to us American viewers. I didn't recognize any of them, but we had some people write in, point out to us that there's Richard E. Grant played Isambaro. He's been in the shows With Nail and I and Doctor Who. We've all heard of Doctor Who. Kevin Eldon played Ned. He's a well-known British comedian guy, apparently. And Essie Davis played Lady Crane, and she was in Matrix Reloaded, among many other things. So, snuck in some fairly well-known people there. And as the show gets bigger, they're more able to do that. Obviously, we got Max von Sydow, and there's another famous actor appearing later this season in a small role who I won't talk about. As usual, we'll be doing some post-credits spoilery talking about what's coming up next week, and as well as things that we've gleaned from the preseason trailers that are becoming relevant, that are becoming clear. And so that's a really nice thing. Also, they snuck in a band there. There's the band Of Monsters and Men was playing above in the rafters there, so that was clever. And, of course, backstage, we get confronted by Penis, a big, giant, wart-covered penis. Yeah, that was... We didn't really need that, but, it's all fair in love and genitals.
I did not need it. It just, after all, all this sort of very highly publicized kind of call for more full frontal male nudity, that was enough. I'm done. If that's how we're gonna get it.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm sure there's a lot of it's not my thing, but if a lot of people out there, if it's like, hey, if they're gonna show us a penis, give us like, I don't know, give us like Loris's or something,
Tormund, come on.
Tormund, yeah. It's supposed to be 6 feet long, right? Tormund Giants member.
The flaccid, warty penis was.
Yeah. Speaking of members, the Mercy chapter is, of course, a TWOW chapter. We won't go into detail on it, but that is a lot of what we saw in this scene with Arya. That is covered in that chapter a bit. I won't be specific, but there's a lot in common there, including the character named Bonobo, who is the dwarf. And in Mercy chapter, this is hardly a spoiler, so I'll go ahead with it. He's wearing a big prosthetic penis, kind of making fun of Tyrion being a whoremonger, I suppose. And it's kind of a nod to the full frontal penis, I suppose. So there's a show to book nod that we probably could have done without. But, we can laugh at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, but getting back to more sophisticated topics, Arya and Jake and the discussion of killing this Lady Crane who is playing the role of Cersei. Arya doesn't like the idea of killing an innocent, brings it up. So the big question is, will she go through with it? Lady Gwen, what do you think?
I think that her killing this woman that she thinks is, innocent, as a decent person, would be counter to the advice Ned gave Bran back in Game of Thrones. If you would take a man's life, you owe it to him to look into his eyes and hear his final words. If you cannot bear to do that, then perhaps the man does not deserve to die.
And she's just confronted with her father in this play, like having him be up there, and she's probably fired up about who he really was because he's being represented so wrongly, so the opposite of who he really was. And so it's like, no, my father was honorable. My father would not do, so it's like right in her consciousness in the important moment there.
Yeah. I think the references to her as Lady Stark and all those pointed comments about faceless men being servants or slaves, combined with her noting the innocence, are really setting her up to not go through with it. But I did wonder, because Lady Crane is portraying Cersei, who's enemy number one on Arya's list. So there's that possible kind of weird connection there.
Yeah, it's a good job. It's the show showing the thing that George says is the only thing worth writing about. Well, he's not the original person who said that, but he agrees with the comment that the human heart and conflict is the only thing worth writing about. And holy crap, Arya's got some conflict right now, and it really comes out on the screen. I like it. Do you think she'll run away? I
do. I kind of assume that she will run away. She's going to have to run away. She can't just say no, thank you. The threat was obvious. So.
Yeah, that means she dies, right? Yeah.
Right. So how
dangerous is that, having the faceless men as enemies?
Yeah, either one way or a face is going to be added to the hall. It's pretty menacing. So hopefully she's learned enough to elude them.
Yeah. This line that Jakin gives her when she says, she's like a decent person or whatever. She says, "Does death only come for the wicked and spare the innocent?" There's a lot of that in this episode coming in the future, in later episodes, and in this episode. Of course, that's a nod to Hodor. Hodor being the innocent that is not spared. And won't it be ironic if Arya joins a death cult only to reject the killing of innocents while Bran goes off to save the world and has to sacrifice innocents along the way? It's a pretty brutal contrast there. And Watching Thomas Budd helped draw our attention to that one. Good job there, Thomas. So, yep, more on the, I really like this whole training phase thing is really neat how they all kind of push that together. I kind of mentioned it earlier, but it really bears double mention.
Yeah, I think it really does, because it's really highlighted. I think we might have even talked about it, how they were all in training earlier. We did, but not earlier. I mean, earlier in the season, but it's really highlighted here how that's ending. So it's a neat observation.
And in the past, if we're going to check on how that pattern went in the past, like John, of course, and Rob kind of got there first. John kind of doing it over, but they all made so many mistakes because that's realistic. You're young, you come along, you learn things, but you still make mistakes even when after you learn things. So, what will Arya's mistakes be? We've just seen one of Bran's mistakes, a big one, and we saw John make some mistakes. Sansa might be making a mistake here. She's getting in charge, but she's already, lied about the Vale Knights, and that could turn out to be a mistake. It might cause some trust issues with John, etc. We'll see. All right, time for our first little ad break. We'll be right back to talk about the Iron Islands and moving forward with this epic episode. All right, I'm all decked out in Ironborn gear today. I got my Victorian Greyjoy shirt. Of course, I did not expect Victorian to be in the show. I almost, several seasons ago, I wasn't sure that the Ironborn would get much of a plot line at all. And when the Ironborn were cast, the law of conservation of actors meant Victorian was highly unlikely to be cast. Our best hope was that Euron and Victorian would be similar in the show, like they would mash them together, but that doesn't appear to be the case. It's all Euron. So, hey, wearing this in honor of my boy Victorian. Of course, I don't think Victorian's a great guy. I just like the character and how he's written. He's, a terrible person, but hey, I like Tywin too, but he's also a terrible person. It's just how he's written. They're good characters. They're well written. So we got a King's Moot. That was cool. The King's Moot had its ups and downs. I mostly liked it. Strong acting by Asha Yara and Theon. What do you think there, Lady Gwen?
I agree with that completely. I think Alfie Allen was absolutely fantastic in this scene. Theon's struggle was so visible in his face, his facial acting. You could really see him give up on that dream of being king once and for all. And at the same time, you could see Yara. She's not sure she really trusts him until the moment when he finally says it. But she was kind of on pins and needles there.
Yeah, she had a really look on her face
oh, don't.
What's going to happen here?
I think she expected the worst from him. So.
Yeah, I think so. Because she did at first, as soon as he arrived, that's what she was thinking. And maybe she, even after he explained, no, I'm not here to do that, she probably still had some doubts.
Yeah. So, Yolkboy, again, noticed something really great about this scene. I thought it was great. I tend not to notice these things. He definitely does. When Theon was making this decision in King's Moot, they were playing the same music that they played after he burnt, not as he was burning Rob's letter, but in the scene right after he burns Rob's letter and makes the choice, he's going to betray him and make that run at being a king for himself. He's being baptized by his, I guess, was it Aaron?
Yeah.
And that's the music. Same. We went back and checked.
All the way back to season 3. I guess that's season 3, right? Yeah. So right as he writes that letter to Rob to warn him, and then he changes his mind and burns it. Yep. Same music. That is awesome. What a great catch. Good job, Yolkboy. See, Yolkboy's still present in this episode, even without being present in this episode.
Yes.
Now, it's a big, this scene was a rub for some people because of, again, this is book expectations. Ashea really pointed this one out again. Ashea is also present in this episode without being present in this episode. And she got us to think more about how kinslaying was there was something off about the scene because of kinslaying. But Asha talks about executing Euron. And then, of course, Euron talks about murdering Asha and Theon. And it's just kind of, if you don't think about it, it doesn't feel right because you're not supposed to. Kinslaying is like one of the, if not the biggest taboo in all of Westeros. But really, the show hasn't really cared about that. It's just a different canon. It's not a bad thing. It's just different. We just have to make sure we wrap our heads around that or it's going to feel wrong. There's tons of examples of this. Dorne, all kinds of kinslaying. Ramsay kinslays Roose, although he at least lied about it. It wasn't that big a deal that Tyrion killed Tywin. I mean, it was more about him killing his father, not about it being his kin. It's just you killed your own father. That's rough. But they didn't really couch it in, oh, he's cursed because he's a kinslayer. That just hasn't really come up. So something to keep in mind, folks. It's just different in the show. Kinslaying, it's not good in show canon, but it isn't like the most horrible, you're cursed by the gods type of thing. So you got to keep that in mind. Now, the crowning ceremony itself, I thought this was much stronger than the King's Moot. I thought the filmmaking was great, the voiceover was great, and it reminded me of the funeral, of Balon's funeral, which was also really well done. What did you think, Lady Gwen?
Yeah, I agree. I think I like this part better than the King's Moot. I also I was glad it took as long as it did, considering what was going on while they were doing that. But um, one thing I noticed is what this, this is purely a religious ritual, and it's something the Ironborn do, obviously. But it struck me that the drowning, when he rose, it's another example that this season of someone not dying or not staying dead when they should have done. And starting with Gregor, I guess that was the end of last season, but John, Danny, we've got these people kind of who shouldn't be here all over the place.
Yeah, it's kind of a nod to that, to everyone dying. I guess you could say he wasn't really dead, but it's a parallel. It's a strong parallel regardless. I really like that. Yeah, in general, I thought that was a great scene. That priest is a really good authoritative voice. That guy playing Aeron. What's funny is he's Aeron, but I'm not sure that he's Aeron Greyjoy, because his age would be off. Or maybe they're just saying, oh, he's a priest. The priests can't inherit. Maybe that's a little piece of show canon that they've kind of assumed. Either way, it's fine. So the main thing as far as driving this plot forward is this whole Iron Fleet business, which is Asha and Theon stealing all these ships. They jumped on that opportunity really quickly. Apparently, that was maybe a little rushed, but hey, I think we're kind of used to rushing things a bit by now. Now, so this is a big difference from show to books as well. In the books, there's already an established Iron Fleet, and it's quite potent. It's got larger ships than just the long ships. It's a proper military fleet, not just a bunch of like Viking raider ships, which is kind of what you think of when you think of a fleet of Ironborn. These are proper warships, things like that. This is what fought in Robert's Rebellion. This was defeated by Stannis. And Victarion is the one who controls it effectively, and they're loyal to him, which is why Euron can't just say, take them over, which is why he sends Victarion to Meereen rather than just taking it over himself, because, well, he can't. He's worried that they won't follow him because they're more loyal to Victarion. So a little smart bit of politicking by Euron. And so in the show, it seems they're just now building. They're calling it, I'm going to build the Iron Fleet, etc. That's referred to kind of obliquely like that. And so, but it seems obvious that probably Asha is going to do what Victarion was going to do, which was steal Euron's plan about an alliance. Of course, she can't go marry Victarion or marry Daenerys like Victarion's plan was. He was going to steal her from Euron. So obviously Asha can't do that. Well, I guess she maybe can. Doesn't seem likely, though. They probably won't do the same-sex wedding in Westeros there. That seems unlikely. But, it's something along those lines that's being done. I guess the major difference is here, they brought up the dragons. They brought up, allying with the dragons, which makes sense. Ally yourself to the person who has the most power and use that to help take over Westeros. No dragon horn, though. That's a big thing. We were really wondering if there would be a dragon horn. I'm not surprised there wasn't. I figured would have been a cool thing for the show to do, like a real easy visual way, like someone blows the horn, the dragons kind of react to it. It seems like it could have played out pretty well on screen. I guess it's not too late for that, but it seems unlikely. Seems like they would have shown it if it was going to happen. Probably no Makoro either. They're doing different Red Priests, which we'll be talking about soon. This one particularly intimidating Red Priest, Kinvara, that's in the Varys and Tyrion scene. We'll be talking about that shortly. But yeah, so that looks like a few other cuts from that plot line, but maybe we'll see maybe they'll sneak some bits and pieces in there. And there's another possible parallel to Victarion that might be showing up. And as we transition, visually they transition from Iron Islands to Vaes Dothrak by showing the Ironborn with particularly Euron staring out over the cliff as the ships went away, and it transitions to Dany standing on the cliff looking down at Vaes Dothrak. Well, the possible parallel here is, well, Victarion had his arm infected with whatever, and it was rotting away basically until Makoro cleansed it with fire in that real creepy scene where it's not Victarion's POV for a minute anymore, even though it's his chapter, which is really unusual. So there's a theory out there that I strongly support that the cure for grayscale will be similar, like burning the arm, doing that same kind of burning the arm, burning the disease away. Maybe that'll work. And of course, with Red Priests on Dany's side, in great numbers, apparently, That could be the way they go with this. So let's move on to Vaes Dothrak, since we're just starting to talk about that. Funny thing happening here. Dany is getting Yara and Theon, if our prediction is right. Plus, she's already got Ilaria and, potentially and company. So Dany has a long string of titles. Queen of Meereen, Queen of this, Mother of Dragons, Breaker of Chains, Queen of the Seven Kingdoms, Queen of the Rhoynar, Queen of all that. She's also now Burner of Calls and Queen of the Cockless. Check that out, right? She's got Varys. Now she's going to have Theon, apparently. And she's already got the Unsullied. That's like 5,000, cockless guys. So it's an interesting kind of thing to collect on your team there. But can't say those aren't talented folks. So that's cool. Good job, Dany. She doesn't even know that she's collecting all these people. She's going to get back and be like, what is... All right, these guys are helping me out. I don't understand this pattern, but... So, do you think what do you think about where Jorah might go? She orders him to cure himself. We've got a few ideas, Lady Gwyn. What do you think?
I liked some of the ideas. The idea of Karth or Ashai.
Yeah.
Could we see Quaithe again? It's probably my wishful thinking.
It was interesting that on the show, Quaithe talked to Jorah, not Dany. So there's already kind of they know each other already. That's you wonder if they thought that far ahead, but. Yeah.
We've seen them pick up a couple of little lingering things this season, so maybe we need to give them a little more credit.
So Ashai, Karth, maybe the Red Priests, maybe Volantis. If he goes to Volantis, he could maybe run into. Maybe that's where Asha and Theon will wind up on their way, like Tyrion and Varys did. That seems to be like the halfway point. Part halfway point to going there. So if other people stopped off there, Jorah could stop off there, they could encounter each other, something like that. Watching her, Matthew Hent suggests Old Town, which is a very cool idea because it would allow Jorah to come in contact with Sam. And Sam and Jorah talking he could learn more about Gior. He already found out that his father's dead from Tyrion. But he doesn't know necessarily about the White Walkers and all that, and that might be how Dany learns about what's going on in the North is through Jorah going to Old Town. The rub with that is Jorah going to Old Town is a bit problematic because of who his ex-wife is, which is Lyness Hightower, and the Hightowers are big in Old Town, and they should be able to recognize him on sight because he married a Hightower. They presumably attended the wedding, or at least a lot of them did. So that is a possible problem, but I love the idea anyway because it does set up some very cool crossing of plot streams. What do you think of that possibility?
Yeah, I think it's possible, but I think that, the Hightower, although I don't know on the show if that's, they're going to make a big deal of it.
Yeah, they might just try to sneak that under the radar.
Yeah, I would like to see more kind of plots interconnecting, and I expect we will as the show's gonna compress down over the next season or so and get more people on the same page or in the same location. So it'd be cool.
Yeah, I agree. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. Very exciting. So let's talk about Meereen, Tyrion, Varys, and Kinvara. Very powerful scene. Kinvara is pretty spooky. She's got sort of that season 2 Melisandre thing going, but perhaps even more intimidating because she unnerves Varys, and unnerving Varys is hard to do. And more good acting there. Conleth Hill really, his shoulders hunched. He could see he was breathing heavily. He was very intimidating, and he stood tall to her, and she just backed him down. It was really something. Now, a couple people commented on the appearance of her. Lady Gwyn, talk about the thematic connection here.
Last week, I think I mentioned is that there is definitely a thematic connection between Melisandre and Quaithe's costuming. There is in Kinvara's costuming the same elongated hexagonal motif, which is present in the necklace, which is, I think the necklace is the same, more or less, as Mel's.
Yeah, it looked the same to me.
Yeah, and the dress, and she also had it on her dress, which apparently Melisandre does too, but it's harder to see because hers is so dark. Quaithe, it was very obvious. So there's something connecting these three women, whether they go back to Quaithe or not.
That is very fitting. In the books, Quaithe is a Shadowbinder from Ashai. That's a tie to Melisandre. It doesn't necessarily have to be a Red Priest thing, but if you go by show simplification, instead of addressing the fact that Melisandre belongs to several different magical disciplines, they just kind of roll it all up into Red Priest and just say some Red Priests are a little different from each other, like Thoros is different than Mel, etc. Speaking of Thoros, no necklace for him, no indication that he's wearing any kind of similar garb. And Rila Fukushima, who was playing the kind of Asian actress playing another Red Priestess last season that Tyrion and Varys encounter on the Long Bridge at Volantis. Also, she's not wearing the necklace. So different things there. Now, in that scene, I was really kind of yelling at the screen a bit, and as a fan, when Varys says, should I tell you what the voice said? Should I tell you who said those words? Yes, tell us. Of course we want to know. Come on, Varys, say yes. Jeez. We also have a pending firestorm, powder keg type situation with zealots versus zealots. I'm really interested in this possibility here because of how destructive it is. We have zealots taking over King's Landing, Faith of the Seven Zealots. And we have zealots in Meereen allying themselves to Dany, calling her the prince that was promised, or the one that was promised in this case. And we have Melisandre, a different Red Priestess, calling Jon the prince that was promised. So how's all that going to play out? Probably not peacefully, is my guess. That's about all I can predict at this point. But just imagine, Kinvara says she's going to send out priests, a bunch of priests preaching about Daenerys. That's just going to stir up so much, especially with her already doing all these things she's done. I mean, she's already proven herself. She's immune to fire. How does that not stick out massively in a fire-worshipping religion? That's like, whoa, there she is. She's clearly important. So, wow, yeah, it's a big deal. But it's really just getting started. We're really not sure where that's going to go. And another thing about Kinvara being such a high-ranking Red Priest is she's taking the place of Benero from the books. Benero is the High Priest of the Red Temple in Volantis, which is the largest one that we've been told about. There are other great Red Temples elsewhere, but it's possibly the largest one. And he's preaching about Daenerys openly when Tyrion and Jorah go by, just saying she's the prince that was promised. She's Azor Ahai, blah, blah, the dragons, etc. He's also preaching some crazy stuff like, worship the Lord of Light and everyone will live forever. Like, what? That's scary. Everyone will live forever. That sounds more like what the others are doing, living forever, although they're not really living forever. Or maybe that's what, Jon coming back to life, Melisandre living forever. So if Kinvara's risen this high in the Red Priestesses, how old is she? How long has she been around? Is she just that talented, or is this indication that she's really ancient as well? No way to know for sure, but cool to think about. Maybe not so cool to imagine, like literally picturing her as a 400-year-old woman like that other scene. That's not as fun. But still, I wonder. Okay, let us move on to the big topic. We've saved most of the episode for that because the implications for the books are, this is one of the biggest scenes, these set of scenes here, one of the biggest book implication scenes we've ever seen on TV. Most things do not generate this much discussion, this much expectations, or this much just anxiety, however you want to put it. It's big. So we'll start with the children making the White Walkers thing. It wasn't super surprising to book readers. It was somewhat surprising to see it confirmed. It's been an idea in the fandom for a long time. And there's now that it's been confirmed, though, new evidence has popped up that's showing that we were told all along, rather. Here's one of my favorites. Hat tip to our buddy Lucifer Means Lightbringer of a Mythical Astronomy of Ice and Fire podcast, who's been on our Ashai episode and our Dane Part 2 episode. He found this quote from Cotter Pike. When Cotter Pike sees Sam After Sam returns from the wall, he says, "Sam the Slayer," he said, by way of greeting. "Are you sure you stabbed an other and not some child's snow knight?" Holy crap. Child's snow knight. Children's snow knights. The others are armored and wearing swords, and they're basically made of snow and ice, and they're made by children. Oh, damn. That is awesome. Great catch. And in retrospect, it's pretty damn obvious. It's one of those things that you could easily, that we all pretty much missed. 99.9% of the fandom. But it's, in retrospect, it's really obvious. It's like, what a weird thing to say. A child's snow knight? What? That's bizarre, right? It's like a weird insult. Like, you sure didn't stab? It's so specific, you know? And yeah, so what did you think? Were you surprised, Lady Gwen?
No, not entirely surprised. We actually discussed this in our Long Night episode last year. We discussed the others in the Long Night and all kinds of stuff at great length. Our conclusion was that the children of the forest had been driven north by men, and then the others originated in the north. So we kind of thought it was logical to think the children had created them, and that there was some sort of, ice sorcery. So I mean, we kind of called it, but we didn't really feel like there was a ton of evidence. It was
yeah, and I don't remember anyone
feeling.
suggesting that they made them from men, which is maybe not book canon, but seems likely. They certainly are shaped like people. They don't look like children. That was the one thing that people were like, if the children made the others, why do they look like mankind? That was one thing that was a bit of a problem for the theory, something that people pointed to as perhaps possible counter evidence. Well, I guess that's been clearly addressed. It looks like it's just they're converted humans. Pretty cool that they used the actor playing Night's King. By the way, it's Night King in the show, Night's King in the book. Night's King as in King of the Night's Watch, because he was the 13th Lord Commander and took over the Night's Watch, kind of ruled as a king. So that's the difference. Night King, Night's King. It's easy to say one when you mean the other, so we're not going to worry about that. But it's worth clarifying. So, very, very interesting stuff here. There's a lot to talk about. We're probably going to jump around a bit as we discuss all these different implications for the books. But here's one that I like a lot. Now we've learned that the children are responsible for this. Here's something that Watchner James Van Sickle suggested that touches on a common theme in the books, which is that myths derive from truths, but the myths themselves have been around so long that this truth is distorted, that it's like a game of telephone. When you tell somebody, you read someone a sentence, and by the time it gets through 5 or 10 different people, that sentence has changed, it's become exaggerated, it's different. So extrapolate that across thousands of years, and you can understand how a story of the children creating the others could change over time, or be perverted in a sense, or be misunderstood. So here's a great quote. We talk about some of this in our Night's King episode that was made, I guess it's been about 1.5 years ago, but got a lot of good stuff in there. Do recommend you checking it out. But some of this information is a little more current. A woman was his downfall, a woman glimpsed from atop the wall, with skin as white as the moon and eyes like blue stars. Fearing nothing, he chased her and caught her and loved her, though her skin was cold as ice. And when he gave his seed to her, he gave his soul as well. Compare that to the idea that the children, depicted as female only in the TV show to this point, and making Night's King. The idea of a woman tempting a man and changing him into this other-like being is perhaps the mythological story, or rather the mythological unpacking of the truth here. Few, if any, would know that truth, considering it's thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. They wouldn't know the real story. So, and they wouldn't assume a transformation. You don't just go, it must have been some sort of magical ritual that transformed a man into another. That's got to be it. It would make more sense, or at least it could make more sense, for that to be interpreted as some sort of breeding, like as in this story. Fearing nothing, he chased her and caught her and loved her. Breeding with her, but actually it's not breeding with her. It's this magical thing. So you'd say that in the myth, what we're told by this myth is that the breeding of these two is what created the others, or something like that. In reality, it was this man was sort of tempted into going off with the children, but really they had this sinister thing in mind, which was to transform human beings into weapons that they could then turn and use against the first men who were destroying them. And of course, ironically, if the others are responsible for the long night, which seems very likely, then the first men, or humankind in general, had to create a weapon to stop a weapon that was made out of them. And if it's depicted at all the same, this Azor Ahai story comes up. It's a nice parallel here. Azor Ahai had to stab his wife Nissa Nissa in the heart to make this powerful weapon to fight the darkness. And what we just saw depicted on TV was an obsidian blade shoved into the actor playing Night's King. That was a nice little touch. Shoved into his chest to make their ultimate weapon. That's just a brilliant little parallel there. Even if it wasn't fully intended, it works really nicely. So now, to be fair, the rest of the Night's King legend doesn't quite fit as well with that story of the Night's King chasing this woman and loving her. But it's truly ancient history. So, of course, there's going to be some things that maybe don't fit perfectly. Like we said, it's a game of telephone expressed over thousands of years. The truth gets distorted. But the timeline is also a little funky. This is something we're going to need to think about this a little longer. It's only been 72 hours since this episode, and this really deserves farther pondering and really thinking about the timeline. Something we definitely didn't have time for with so many other things to talk about. But I'll throw out there the basics. Okay, if this Night King was turned into an other, the first other, well, why is there a wall already? If he's Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, what is there a wall there for? Were the others, shouldn't there have already been others for there to have been a wall? Yeah. And that would have already meant there was a long night, so he couldn't have been part of that. So maybe there's just some important details about the past that we're not aware of. Like maybe the others, it wasn't just an overnight thing. It was the Lightbringer is made, others are defeated, and they're gone forever. Maybe it was more gradual. Maybe it was a long struggle, and then the others finally vanished one day, and they've been gone until now. That's just one possibility out of many. But here's another really funny thing that is curious. Shouldn't the children have no trouble at all dealing with the others / White Walkers? And showing that obsidian was part of the ritual to create them. It's almost like it's like a kryptonite thing where the thing that, Superman isn't literally made by kryptonite, but the thing that is part of them is also the thing that can destroy them.
Mm.
Do you have any thoughts on that, Lady Gwyn?
Well, yeah, quite a few. I think they...
Yeah, I haven't let you talk for a while. So you get some thoughts in there.
The thoughts are many and diverse.
Yeah, where to start, right?
The children should be, easily able to kill White Walkers with obsidian. I think in the books it's made pretty obvious that obsidian is their weakness. Sam says, he finds in a book, it says fire will dismay them. They're vulnerable to obsidian. It's a slight difference with fire. Then he also tells Jon, I found mention of dragonglass. The children of the forest used to give the Night's Watch 100 obsidian daggers every year during the Age of Heroes. Well, why were they doing that? Probably to give them weapons against these creatures they created that would be vulnerable to obsidian. Melisandre,
you want to do this?
she terms it dragonglass, as she's the first person to call it frozen fire. She says it's the old Valyrian translation, and she says, small wonder it's anathema to these cold children of the other. And she doesn't mean the other, as she's talking about the great other. Yeah,
the obsidian frozen fire. Like frozen fire, how does no two-word phrase encapsulates a Song of Ice and Fire better than that, I think.
Yeah. So I think it's cool. They, George describes them as ice made flesh. The show seemed to portray them as flesh turned into ice, which is a pretty minor difference, but they have magical control over ice, but they're vulnerable to fire made ice. So
yeah.
Just an interesting kind of loop of themes there. So
yeah. Okay, well, let's take another quick break, and we'll come back with plenty more on this topic. There is so much to say. We're both a little just, we don't even know where to begin. There's so many things to say, but we'll get them all said. Maybe not in the right order, but we'll get them all out there. Be right back, folks. Yeah, this whole, the whole just, Obsidian's always been really important, but now it's just more important. It's just being driven to the forefront even more than it was before. I want to say something else about the Night King in terms of what we learned from George. George has indicated that there probably isn't a Night King figure in the modern storyline. There may have, the legendary Night's King is his own thing, but there isn't just some central other bad guy villain that we can expect to see. Maybe we can, but he has kind of downplayed that possibility, maybe to be sneaky. But so far, the books have given us zero indication directly that that's going to be the case. So we'll see. It looks like the others may not have, one ruler or one person in charge. And I, of course, back in the day, one of the things I said about the others creating the children, I don't know how long ago I said this, maybe 7 years ago, who knows, a long time ago. It wouldn't be very Martin-esque for the children to agree as a whole race on something. There would have to be, I would guess that there were some children that were like, yes, we need to make these others, I don't know what they called them, to fight back against the first men. And there probably were some that were like, no, we shouldn't do this. It's too dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And maybe that's why there are children now that were, or not just now, but thousands of years ago. At some point, the children decided to stop fighting the first men. Maybe they were obeying the pack. Maybe they decided that what they did was too wrong. Unleashing this evil on the world was something that they need to, make up for. But at some point, the children started helping the men instead of fighting them. And maybe that's, again, related to the pact. But even that is hard to say for sure, because the pact was broken by the Andals later. The pact was between the first men and the children. But the Andal invasion came later, and the Andals had no reason to, obey the pact that was made thousands of years before. So they went back to burning down the werewoods, and probably weren't that many children around for them to kill. But if there were, the ones that they did see probably got killed too. So yeah, there's all that. Now, as for taking this back to the show a little bit and trying to make sense of some of these connection points, what we're shown is this ties into what you were saying before, Lady Gwyn, about how one of the reasons you all made this guess in your show was because of the proximity to where the children have been driven, which is north of the wall, to where the others supposedly are born. And that proximity indicates a potential for connection, which seems to have been confirmed here. But it's shown on the show is that they're kind of tied to the spot where they're born, the spot where these black stones are arranged in a spiral, which is not the first time we've seen that. We saw the slaughtered horses arranged in a spiral back in, I guess that was season 3, maybe season 2 even. But it's that same pattern that we saw a long time ago. And when Bran sees the ritual, the children, there's no frost, there's no ice. It's now permanently frozen. The tree is frozen. The stones are frozen. Was the area fertile before? In show canon, clearly it was, it seems. But in book canon, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think it seems likely that the north, that area wasn't always just the frozen. That's a huge, looking at the maps behind you, it's just this huge area that's just a big chunk of ice now. It seems possible that it was all part of one big fertile continent at one point. Yeah,
it's definitely possible. And the thing that makes me wonder, though, is that Westeros is very northern as far as the planet. If you look at a world map, the fingers lines up with Braavos, basically. So Essos is mostly south of Westeros on a global scale. So you'd think that they would be cold anyway, but maybe not. Maybe the world actually goes a lot farther north there, and whatever their equivalent of some sort of polar ice caps has been altered by this whatever messes with the seasons. So it's really hard to say, but there is some fertile valleys in the north, like the Valley of the Fens has a lot of green in it, and that could be a hint that was more widespread in that area before. So very, very cool. Now, a couple other questions. The children making the White Walkers, were those black stones those obelisks around the site of this ritual, asked by several people asked this question, including Watchner Summer Child. Were those the same oily black stones that we see in other places? Well, it could be a nod to that. I'm guessing if the show wouldn't be so expansive on that, and that might be why we saw obsidian instead of something else as far as creating the others, although I tend to think that that is what the show canon will do if they book canon will do if they delve into that at all. I'm not sure that we'll ever learn the specifics of how the children made the first others. If we do, that'd be pretty sweet. And of course, it would have to come through a brand vision. I really can't see where else it would come. So let's see. But there's another question. We touched on this a bit before, which was that the children should be able to kill the White Walkers because of the obsidian. They know they made them. They've maybe built in this weakness. Well, if that's the case, how did they get out of control? Why didn't the children just put the others down? Like, oh, this is getting out of control. They're causing the long night, or they're whatever. What was it why can't they kill them? What is the problem now? And what went wrong in general? It seems like maybe, well, the children are so tied to nature when they created these beings that any being, magical or not, wants to propagate itself. Any species wants to continue itself. And these are magical beings, so their rules of propagation are very different. I guess they steal babies? Is that their method of propagation? Or is it something to do with what we heard about this siring half-human children with a female other in the original Night's King legend? It's somewhere in between? I don't know. Maybe we're mixing show and book canon. Lady Gwen, give me your thoughts on that.
Well, we had some speculation about this when we did our episode about the Long Night, because it is mentioned several times that the others lay with women, human women, to sire terrible half-human children. We actually came to the conclusion that the Night's Queen, if you want to call her that.
It's a good name for her, yeah.
Night's Queen, may have been one of these offspring, because it seems pretty clear that there's no female others. But she's very other. The way she's described is very kind of otherly.
Yeah.
So, first of all, not having females could have been a fail-safe kind of thing. But, the children created these others. They're all men, thinking they won't be able to propagate. But like you said, they have this kind of natural desire to do that. And so they go off and sire half-breeds with female women. So in terms of actual propagation, we wondered if Craster's line could be descended from those hybrids. Would give a literary purpose to Craster's incest, kind of like the Targaryens keeping their bloodlines pure, right? It's been speculated for a long time that there's something to do about his bloodline that makes his male children so attractive to the others. So
very interesting. Yeah, so that is and that is, as much as we can't be sure about the creation process of the others, the giving of sons to the others is both a book and show thing. So it's a very strong chance that there's some parallels, close or not so close. And I also wonder about this. I still want to talk about this whole getting out of control thing and what originally happened. Without understanding how that happened, we can talk about some parallels to that happening, which is Gregor is the really obvious one, a monster getting out of control, creating a monster to do your bidding, to be an ultimate weapon, getting out of control. Gregor's not out of control, but this makes me think he will be, and we've always kind of considered that possibility, this whole Frankenstein thing. Another possibility is the dragons themselves. Dany created them, sort of. Matt not literally created them, but in a sense she created them, or at least brought them back. And they may have been engineered initially, as we talked about in other episodes, like our Ashai episode, is how maybe the dragons were first created by some other race through some sort of magical engineering. Mel's shadow babies, another possibility of something getting out of control. Or a more literal or a less literal monster like Dany's followers, like the Zealots we talked about. Maybe those getting out of control and being, unleashing them on Westeros and not being able to control it. To a lesser extent, even the Dothraki might qualify for that. They're a vicious and bloody group of, killers. So one suggestion, there's a lot to think about there. Gregor getting out of control, I really think that's going to happen now. We kind of always suspected that possibility, but now it's almost like I almost want to call it a slam dunk, like definitely going to happen. But how, like, what's it's going to mean? Like, in what way does he get out of control? And what does he do when he gets out of control? That, oh boy, no idea. So along those lines, maybe that's what got out of control with the children creating the White Walkers. The thing that maybe was the unintended consequence was them being able to raise the dead. Maybe the children didn't intend for that possibility, and that's something the children would have a hard time dealing with. If the White Walkers can create an army of the dead, that army of the dead, it can be sort of their human shields against obsidian arrows and such like that, which you'd think that would be so easy, to shoot an obsidian arrow at these walkers, and the children shouldn't have a lot of trouble with that.
Yeah, look how easy it was for Mira. I mean,
yeah.
Cut, you got one. There's only 3 others. Just... But those whites, they were kind of inseparable.
They really were. And it's interesting because I have this in my notes somewhere for this episode and I can't find it, but I think I wanted to credit the person who pointed this out to us. But back in earlier seasons, the depiction of others were without armor. It may be like when Sam stabbed, no armor. She was basically shirtless. So you wonder if maybe the others started wearing armor after what Sam did. Or maybe they started wearing others' armor because they knew the obsidian weapons were out there and they had to protect themselves from that. Yeah, either way, I like the idea of them kind of adapting like nature would, or like an intelligent species would, to their very overwhelming weakness, as strong as they are. I mean, scratched by a dragon glass and you just melt. That's a pretty big problem. But I really like the idea of the whites as an unintended consequence. The children didn't see that coming, and that's something they can't deal with because their weapons, obsidian weapons potent against the others, obsidian weapons useless against whites. They just stick a bad brittle dagger against something that is not going to be worried about being stabbed. You have to shred them to pieces or set them on fire or something like that. So I'm guessing the children's only weapon against them was fire, and maybe some magic stuff too, but who knows? Anyway, so much to unpack in the scene. Let's talk about Bran going into the vision when he shouldn't be, messing around with forces that are beyond his understanding at this point, and how things proceed from there. Now, there's some conflict and some, interpretations of this as a paradox, which I agree with. It is sort of a paradox, but we don't have to see it that way, and here's why. First of all, let me just bring back a few things that happened in the scene. Okay, so what happens is Bran is touched in his dream, or his vision, and that allows the Night King to invade their safe space because of this touch. Now, there's other meanings for this touch that we'll get to, but for now, the meaning is, the implication right away is the three-eyed blood raven says, okay, well, now he's coming. Now they're coming for you. You have to become me. I have to teach you everything I know really quickly. And as we're told in the behind the episode thing, it's like a downloading. It's like they kind of connect and it's like connecting an external hard drive or something. And he's trying to get as much info as he can. So there's a couple of interpretations of why Bran is seeing what he sees at the pivotal moment. It's sort of like, it's almost puzzling. It's like, why is Bran seeing this scene of Rickard sending Ned off to the Vale with Benjen and Hodor standing there? It's kind of like, this is something important? Okay. Well, maybe it was. Maybe we're just not seeing the importance of that scene. Maybe it has something to do with, maybe the showing of Benjen is important. Or maybe it's just part of the paradox where Bloodraven knew Bran had to be at that moment in time for this whole thing to work properly so he could save himself using Hodor. If that's the case, well, it's just a paradox, and you can't really go any farther than that other than to say, hey, we've had miraculous things happen in this story before, like Dany bringing back the dragons, which George flat out calls a miracle. So we can say this is a miracle too. We don't have to assume that Bran can duplicate this, that he can continue to speak through the past. Here's why. All the other times he's released the branch, his vision ends. Did not happen in this scene, though. Mira pulls him away, doesn't break him out of the vision. I think it's because he's in this special downloading state. He's in a deeper dream state because he's getting all this information through this not normal method of sending all his visions from one brain to the other. And so that's why he couldn't wake up. And that's why it's this like unusual, unrepeatable sort of dream state. What's going to bring him back to this dream state where he's in this downloading state? Nothing. He's not going to, there are no more green seers for him to download information from. So he cannot get back to that point. So that's my rant on why it might work as a paradox. There's also something I said in the show only review, which is that, hey, time is a human construct. Time is a limitation of our perception. We don't understand how time works in the real world. Maybe that's too meta to give them an out using that, but I think it's fair to throw out. So the other major implication of this, which I think is potentially huge, though I don't know that it applies to the books, it's still a really cool possibility for the show, is, okay, what if Bran goes through the wall? Does that mean Night King can follow him through the wall because of that touch? Is this a similar kind of ward that has now been broken? You have any thoughts on that, Lady Gwen? Is that just too hard to say, or?
No, I think that's a really good idea because he's got it's a mark. That's a literary trope. I was kind of reading up about it last night. It's related to the mark of the beast, but it's basically, there's something to this. I don't expect that to go away. So whether it affects the wall, whether somebody figures it out before, and Bran can never go past the wall again in order to save humankind.
That would be sort of like, some people expected that he would stay in the tree forever. Now, this is, of course, in the show, he clearly isn't. In the books, it doesn't necessarily mean he won't leave the tree in the books or that he will, but maybe this is the show's equivalent. Instead of leaving he leaves the tree but still can't cross the wall. Maybe in the books he can't leave the tree at all. But he could. This kind of pushes me toward thinking he will leave the tree. Although I was one of those people who thought he wouldn't. At least there's a good chance of that. But you were on the other side of that, right? You thought he would leave, right?
I did think he would leave. Yeah. So.
All right. Looking like you might be right there.
But whether he can get back where he wants to go is another question, I guess. So.
Yeah. And the same setup is there. We don't know if it's going to be something similar, some sort of time travel paradox will happen in the books, but the opportunity is there because Bran did. His father did hear it through the weirwood. He didn't hear, maybe a specific word. He heard, rustling in the leaves. But that could be setting up the ability for him to maybe speak to the past. I don't think that George is going to go all high magic and have him just be able to just do this over and over. I've seen theories like, oh, Bran's the one that drove the Mad King mad. Bran's the one that spoke to Rhaegar, telling him to do that, or some other Green Seer did these things. And so that just opens up a whole ball of wax that is just impenetrably large for possibilities. Like all the way for anything from those things, all the way to Bran Stark. This Bran Stark is Bran the Builder. The same, he's gone back in time, he's done all these things. I mean, that's just too many possibilities there. I suppose that has to be possible, but I don't think it's going to be that. That's just too magical. I think that's too big, too powerful.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be more like the Daddy thing, where it's a one-time special event that is very meaningful towards the rest of the story. Is that kind of how you feel about it?
Yes, probably. I did some reading about this time travel this morning. There was an article in Business Insider, I think. Theoretical physicist called Sean Carroll explained the time traveling in this scene for us. He called it a consistent causal loop, which is something in theoretical physics where someone from a later time goes back, alters the events of the past, but it's consistent with how the events will later play out. It creates the future that sends the time traveler back, which is something like we saw in the movie 12 Monkeys.
Mm-hmm. I love that movie.
I'm sorry, I just spoiled it for you.
Well, I think it's okay to spoil movies that have been out for, 15 years?
Oh, yeah, way too long.
But it's not really a spoiler. But
not a paradox in that case, but the other one, the inconsistent one, where you're changing the past, where you're sort of like erasing things that might have happened, or that's an inconsistent causal loop, and that would be a paradox. So
there you go, folks. That's a theoretical physicist saying that what we saw on this show was not a paradox. There you go. Now, you may disagree, but he's a theoretical physicist and we're not, so I'm gonna go with his opinion, frankly.
I thought it was a paradox, but a
I
couple
did too.
people pointed me to these really in-depth analyses. So
yeah, but that's why I brought up the meta of it's a limit of our human perception. We don't know these things. It's just what we see. I mean,
yeah.
Infrared light and ultraviolet light are everywhere, but we can't see them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot about our senses that we don't understand. So that's a whole nother discussion. Yeah.
And this all assumes that Westeros behaves the way our world behaves. Theoretical physics in our world.
That's also very true. Okay, let's talk about the actual escape through the door. You have a moral conundrum to discuss that I think some people may have slightly missed or maybe didn't fully touch on. Others really hammered in on this point. So take us away.
Yeah, we got a fair amount of feedback about this, and I was aware of it. Is Hodor a hero? People, even Christian Nairn seemed to be implying that Hodor sacrificed himself for his friends in the same way that Summer may have done. But was he actually aware of what he was doing, or was Bran in control of him and kind of forcing him? Some people really felt it was the latter, and that Hodor was more of a sacrifice, human sacrifice. Like I think you said, Aziz, maybe like the human that the children sacrificed. So, I like the idea that Hodor was a hero. And since George has confirmed that it will play out differently in the books, I did find a line in the books that I thought might hint to us that perhaps we can hope that Hodor actually is really doing something heroic of his own free will. Way back in Clash, Bran said to Hodor, "You could have been a great knight, or you could have been a knight too, I bet. If the gods hadn't taken your wits, you would have been a great knight." And Hodor's reply, of course, was, "Hodor?" And it says he blinked at him with his guileless brown eyes innocent of understanding. So you could kind of read that, I guess, in one of two ways, either foreshadowing Hodor being a heroic knight or Hodor having absolutely zero understanding of what was happening.
Yeah.
With the moral conundrum.
That's a good way to put it. Well, yeah, well said there. That's a good way to kind of encapsulate the issue here. It's if Hodor didn't decide to do any of that, if he was just controlled by Bran, then I mean it's heroic in a way, but not with any agency. And of course it's sad regardless. It's tragic as hell regardless, because if Bran made it happen, then Bran now has to deal with the fact that his mistake led to this, that he is the reason that Hodor is dead, that those children are dead, that the three-eyed blood raven is dead. He caused all that, and that is not going to. It's not going to sit well with him, of course. Even Isaac Hempstead Wright tweeted, "Good job, Bran." And I don't think he was patting himself on the back. No. I think he was like, "Look what you did, you naive child." Now you have a cool idea on where the hold the door could apply to an area north of the wall that could maybe fit in with what we're seeing here. What's that?
Yeah, I had wondered when we heard the episode title if the door was going to be the Black Gate, if we might get back there, because I expected Bran to be leaving that tree, but not so much. But could that be in the books? The door is actually the Black Gate at the Night Fort. So
I like that. I like that idea a lot. The Black Gate, of course, yeah, like you said, is the door of the Night Fort that talks, the talking werewood door that Sam, that you have to be a brother of the Night's Watch to pass through. Or have it opened for you by a brother of the Night's Watch. So yeah, I could see that being maybe how they escape back through the wall, is going through that's kind of the way they got. That's how they got north of the wall. So that maybe it would make sense if they return that way. And if they're being pursued, which we're seeing on the show, it could be that they're being pursued as they try to flee the north. So that would fit very nicely. And the door, that is one door we've seen. And that would be quite a door to hold. Although if the children, if only a brother in the Night's Watch can pass it, maybe that's a problem with this theory that the undead shouldn't be able to. But if some sort of magic is removed from the wall, some sort of horn, some sort of brand being touched and it breaks that ward, all those things could happen. And it could just be a mundane door from then on.
Well, the whites can pass the door, pass the wall. So
that's true.
I don't know if the door has a separate magic from the wall, but so they could, the others could be sending their undead servants through to.
That's true. The Jafer Flowers Othor thing was something very important from Clash of Kings there. Yeah. So here's another question. This is maybe more related to the show than book, although it's interesting to think about the possibility. Are all the children dead now on the show? Seems kind of unlikely that that'll happen in the books, that just all of them will be dead, because it just won't be, there will be no way to show to the reader that there aren't any left, maybe, unless Bran sees it somehow. But we see, I believe, 6 or 7 children in the cave with Bran, and their sex is ambiguous. Some of them are distinctly female, others we don't know. So we may be seeing the same all-female thing that George has just hidden it by giving them kind of, they're androgynous names. Like Black Knife is one of them, for example. And Snowy Locks. Like Snowy Locks sounds kind of feminine, but it doesn't have to be. Mm-hmm. So it's just hard to say, maybe that's something that's something they'll dawn on. It's like, hey, you know what? Bran will be looking around in the cave like, you know what? All these children are female. What's up with that? All these others are male. What is up with that? So I kind of doubt that's the way they're going to go in the books, but I almost think that is what's going on in the show. The children, maybe just that's it. They're gone. Those were the last ones, and we won't see them again. Maybe. If I had to bet on it, I think that's the way I'd lean. What about you? Do you think they're all gone in the show?
In the show, yeah, I think, because they'd have to just introduce a whole new pack of Children of the Forest. I don't see them going that way. I see them sort of leaving that storyline and now progressing elsewhere. So yeah, I think that
maybe they leave it open. Like maybe there's still some out there somewhere, but we won't see them.
Yeah, they're just too far hidden away. But yeah, they're not going to be a big role anymore, I don't think. Maybe the actual end of the series, like we'll catch them like hiding behind a tree. One of them will wink at Bran, like we're still out there. It'd be like end of Star Wars or end of Return of the Jedi when they just appear like as an image, Right. Like, oh, we're still watching you from above. Right. Yoda, Children of the Forest, a little relationship there, right? No, not really. No. Well, there are the ancientness. There's that, and the teaching old knowledge. Short,
short, green.
Greenish.
Hey, I'm wrong. They're closer than I thought. So now we also have interesting related to how many children are there, or if they're all gone. How many others are there? Do they have a limited number in book and show? Now in the books, of course, we have no way of knowing. We've saw more others in the prologue than we've seen all the other rest of the books combined. So really just
there were 6 in the prologue, but.
Yeah,
we've never seen that many, obviously, together or separately again. So
there's no way to know at this point in the books whether that's the case, but it could be that there's a limited number, and that would make sense if they're engineered and they have trouble propagating. Maybe they make more through babies. That's their only way. But of course, they probably can't have that many opportunities to make more themselves. So in the show, though. There were 4 at the start of the scene, and then 1 gets killed, so there's 3. Is that where we're at now? Are there 3? What happened to the one that they made, the baby that they touched and turned, made him? Is that one still kind of growing up?
He's in a pod somewhere, getting bigger.
They're waiting for him to we need you
now. Maybe he replaced the one that Sam killed. Maybe they just replaced the same 4, so there's always 4 every time.
Yeah.
He'll crack open that egg and bring him out to replace the one that Mira killed.
So we talk so much of this revolves around the possibility of looking back in time, but in the books there's some talk of the possibility to look forward, isn't there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Bloodraven talks about a weirwood. And what time means to a weirwood. He says a weirwood will live forever if left undisturbed. To them, seasons pass in a flutter of moth wing, past, present, and future are one. He's basically saying time is a flat circle, which is that, again, it's to our brains, it probably seems a little paradoxical, but it's definitely implied that the future is accessible to greenseers. Remember, Raven knew that Bran was coming. He says, I've been waiting for you. Yeah. So could he have seen, we touched on this, could he have seen that this was going to happen. He could have seen it in the past, you know, looking into past Winterfell. He could have seen what happened to Willis / Hodor, or into the future. I definitely got the feeling that at a point, he knew what was going to happen. Right there.
And Bloodraven himself, as a character in the books, was certainly interested in prophecy. When he was made Hand of the King in, I believe it was 209, it was King Aerys the First, not the Mad King, and King Aerys the First was big into magic and the arcane and researching. He was into prophecies. He thought that the dragons would come back because of what he read in some prophecies. So, of course, the very existence of prophecies all over Song of Ice and Fire just, you know, validates this whole seeing ahead idea for someone as powerful as Bloodraven. If Melisandre and all these other people can see into the future. And we've also talked at length in many different episodes about how these different magical spheres bleed into each other. There's all kinds of resurrection magic. There's all kinds of prophecy magic. So here you go. Prophecy magic, seeing ahead, fits very well. Okay, another quick break, and we'll come back to talk about more. We've got a great parallel of Bran to the last hero. We're going to get into that when we come back. Okay, Bran is looking like he fits this last hero legend / myth quite well. This was something that we'd thought about a bit, but our Patreon supporter, Lord James Saunders of the Chicken Dance, suggested this to us in email as something to focus on. Definitely agree with him that it's an important thing. So we pulled some quotes, and little did I know what I would find in this quote. There was more to this quote than I remembered, and it's pretty sweet. So this is old Nan talking to Bran. That rhymed. So as cold and death filled the earth, the last hero determined to seek out the children in the hopes that their ancient magics could win back what the armies of men had lost. He set out into the dead lands with a sword, a horse, a dog, and a dozen companions. For years he searched, until he despaired of ever finding the children of the forest in their secret cities. One by one his friends died, and his horse, and finally even his dog. And his sword froze so hard the blade snapped when he tried to use it. And the others smelled the hot blood in him and came silent on his trail, stalking him with packs of pale white spiders, big as hounds. Bam! The door opened with a bang, and Bran's heart leapt up into his mouth in sudden fear, but it was only Maester Luwin with Hodor looming in the stairway behind him. Hodor, the stable boy announced, as was his custom, smiling hugely at them all. Where to start with that? God, several things. One, okay, it's another example of something we've talked about a bunch of times, how George likes to do this, and the show occasionally does the same thing, where someone is giving a really revealing speech, a spoilery, like, ancient mystery type explanation, and they're interrupted. This is another example of that I never really noticed before, or I probably noticed it, but didn't necessarily bring it into this category. But it was Hodor interrupting Bran. That's the other thing that's really important. I mean, Luwin was there too, but Hodor is the one who says something. And God, that's from Game of Thrones. That's 20 years ago this was set up. 20. But more importantly, well, maybe more importantly, look at how similar this all is. Bran sets out with his brother, Osha, 2 wolves, Mira, Jojen, Hodor. They have iron swords they took from Winterfell's crypts, and they go looking for children of the forest and the last green seer. And here's another quote from the books predicting this. All Bran could think of was old Nan's story of the others and the last hero, hounded through the white woods by dead men and spiders big as hounds. He was afraid for a moment until he remembered how that story ended. The children will help him, he blurted. The children of the forest. Well, they did. That's exactly what's happening. The children are helping Bran. And he has lost so many of his companions. Rickon and Osha, they didn't die. They went somewhere else, but he lost them. They even got Cold Hands to help. And his elk died. And Cold Hands was maybe torn apart by the whites as they were trying to make it into the cave. So another companion lost. The elk was kind of like the horse that's in the last hero story. Ooh, it's really strong parallels there. And if you're a believer in Jojen paste, well, then there's that too, that Jojen would be dead too, which means we should be worried about Mira. I guess Mira should be on the worry of the week this week, huh? And of course, he said that these things are sacrifices, he's lost his friends, and this is a literal sacrifice. Hodor was kind of sacrificed in a sense, and again, Jojen pays. That's a potential sacrifice as well. And Bloodraven is referred to as the last Greenseer by the children in A Dance with Dragons, and Bran is taking on that role, right? Last Greenseer, last hero. Oof, so it would seem, right? That is a lot to digest and a lot to think about. Oof. What do you think? Do you think that last hero thing is just really solid? Where were you at on last hero? Maybe like a year ago, for example. Do you think it was Bran? Did you think maybe it was Jon?
No, I thought the last hero and Azor Ahai were the same. We talked about that in our episode. But I guess, we have to draw a distinction between Azor Ahai, past Azor Ahai, and Azor Ahai Reborn. They're not the same, and the Prince that was promised. We did notice there are parallels here, obviously. And it's pretty striking. One thing that struck me about all this was in that when it's made obvious that Bran knows the end of the story, I just thought that was really neat writing, because you get that interrupted story, and then much later it's Bran thinking about Old Nan's story, and he kind of blurts out, "The children will help." And now, it's just a sneaky way of like, oh wait, we kind of got the end of the story there. I thought it was really neat writing.
Yeah, you wonder if he'll lose them too, if that's part of it. If he's found them, so is past that point in the last hero story, or if the worst is yet to come for him, whereas he'll be chased out of the cave in the books, and he loses Hodor in the books and Summer in the books. That would be the dog that the last hero loses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And,
there's still Mira, and Jojen is still maybe alive in the books. It's not really clear at this point. So all that loss is still set up as a possibility there. And, well, that's not necessarily something to look forward to in that sense.
Really.
Looking forward to Bran's suffering, yeah. I'm looking forward to the mysteries and the writing and the curiosities being solved, but the tragedy is going to hurt.
It always does. And this was a pretty brutal one.
Are we all masochists, really? Are we just being?
A few years ago, I got my mom to read these books, and she'd read one, and then she'd call me and say, "Does anything ever good ever happen?" And it's just like, read the next one. And after every book, it was, "Does anything good ever happen?" And finally, after she read A Dance with Dragons, and she was asking me this question, I said, I don't know. Maybe not. I just keep hoping. It must be some kind of masochist.
Yeah.
But there are good things. That's all.
There are, yeah.
Yeah.
Tragedy interspersed with bigger tragedy.
Minor triumphs, but yeah.
See, the big tragedies just make the little tragedies seem even smaller by comparison. That's how it is. It's more of a tragedy pragmatism.
Scale of tragedies.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that's only a 2 on the tragedy scale compared to a 9.
That was good.
That's going to start looking like a good thing. Okay, well, let's go ahead and move to our credits and acknowledgments, and then we will come back with some discussion about the trailer. This trailer discussion has got some extra fun stuff in it because there were some things in the preseason trailers that we can finally understand, that finally make sense, that before we couldn't place them. We couldn't see what the deal was and how they fit into anything. Now we have some insight, so it's time to share that with you folks if you want to know. If you don't, we'll see you next time. Don't forget Q&A tomorrow, Thursday, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And of course, we'll be back at the regular time next week with the next book to show review. And we will be doing we're going to schedule a Q&A of sorts, probably a roundtable, going to get some other guests to come on, and we'll discuss all the things that have happened to this point as a whole, looking at the season as a whole. That will probably not happen until after episode 6, though, so keep an eye out for that. Will be a little extra, sort of just past mid-season, sort of catch up and answer a lot of questions that people have. There's a lot of reason to look at things as a whole rather than episode to episode. And it's never a bad idea to talk about Game of Thrones a little more, right? So, thanks again, Lady Gwen, for joining me. I know it's a little bit harder this week with Balticon coming up, but we had a lot of fun today, and we're not quite done yet. So just remind everybody where to find you all. You talked about your Littlefinger episodes, which I highly recommend. Those were the last two you all did before the start of this season, becoming more and more relevant as Littlefinger's role grows on the show. So go ahead and tell people where to find you.
You can find us at radiowesteros.com. And yeah, check out Littlefinger, check out The Long Night, all of our other episodes right there. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And like you said, coming up this weekend, you can find us in Baltimore, Maryland.
Right on. Hope to see some of you there. Let us know if you're going to be there and want to see us. You know what we look like, so it's easy for you to find us. We won't necessarily know who you are, so definitely don't be shy. Come up and say, hey, we're friendly people. So, credits, let's say. Let me say some acknowledgments to our lovely Patreon supporters that make this all possible, that allow me to spend so much time talking about Game of Thrones. I am eternally grateful to First Lord Cash Craig, Hand of the King, Lord of Mines, Lord of Makers, the Black Pupil, and a proud new homeowner. Congrats, Lord Cash Craig. Lord Jim the Fortuitous of Warriors and Politics of Ice and Fire blog and Warden of the West. Also looking forward to seeing him at Balticon. Also going to be there. Lord George Stormsville the Cunning is Lord of the Chiliad and Warden of the East. Lord John Reed is of Castle Woodbridge. He's the Lord Borealis, the Light of the North and Warden of the North. Lady Kelly McMath of Covington, Lady of the Villa Hills and Crescent Springs, is Warden of the South. Our small council is made up of Lord James Inkblade, the Scholar Knight, Master of Whisperers. Our Grand Maester is Saria of the Barrows, Cinder of the Citadel. Lord Robert Jacobs is the Master of Coin. Rosie the Clever is our Master of Laws, and Lord James Tuttle is our esteemed Master of Ships. A far better Master of Ships than Paxter Redwine. That's for sure. Lord and ladies in their castles include Lady Direliz of Castle Naki, the Alpha Patron. Lord Dan of Red Mountains and Castle Great Bell is Breaker of the Second Stone. Lord Skip of the Veldt is Lord of Castle Ganges. Kabeth the Unfrozen is Lord of the Bricks and Castle Crimson Light. Mary Meg is Lady of the Bloody Stepstones. Gregor the Toasty is Lord of the Bread Fort. Alicia Everlasting of the Green Blood is Lady of Desert Rose. Jeffrey the Unflinching is Lord of Sand Lake. Lord Grey Bay is of the Queen City. Lord Ryan of Castle Stonegate is Guardian of the Rocky Mountain Pass. Lord Garen de Haviland is of Devil's Hand Keep. Lord Brandon Slate is the North's Hammer and Harbinger of the Old Gods. Lady Brame is Light of Winter's Garden, Beacon of the Northwest. Lord Mark Joseph is the Snow in Winterfell. Ashlyn Winter is the Hawk's Eye and Lady of Castle Skyfall. Lady Mikkel of Moonacre is the leader of the Werewood Protectorate Alliance. Lady Cochon Volant is of Swine Harbor. And Lord Barone of Hillcrest is Lord of the Halls and wielder of the Valyrian steel machete Everglazed. King's Justice Sir Troy the Steady wields the Valyrian steel blade Fate. Our Kingsguard is commanded by Lord Commander Dubbington, the Red Bear. And of course, last but not least, our History of Westeros Night's Watch is commanded by Lord Commander George the Golden, backed up by the fierce First Ranger Fabian Flowers, the bastard of Green Shield. Okay, I said a mouthful, but we're not done. Time to talk about the credits. The next week on, rather. I just did the credits. I'm all lost in time like Bran. So, these credits, in some ways, were less revealing than any other credits we've seen for the season. I keep calling them credits. The trailer for next season.
You're in a consistent casual loop.
Yes, that's true. I'm stuck in time. Part of my brain is in the past. So, like I said, I'll start with the stuff that didn't tell us much. We didn't see any of King's Landing this episode, which I believe that was the first time this season. So they kind of delaying our resolution there. We made some predictions. We pointed out some nice conspiracy theories. And there's one hit to the conspiracy theory, which is that Marjorie is seen on the steps. And I thought maybe that was a decoy, that they weren't going to actually bring her out, that it was going to be some sort of setup. There's also the theory that the Cersei was setting up the Tyrells to fight the Faith and have them look bad while the Lannisters just sit back and let them tear each other apart. Problem with that is that Jaime is leading this Tyrell army along with Mace Tyrell, as seen in the trailer. So he's sitting outside of the castle steps with her as the High Septon comes out, or with Mace rather, as the High Septon comes out with Marjorie. So we didn't learn much from that.
No.
Or did I miss something? You agree with that, Lady Gwen, or is it just
kind of I think that seems like it may be pretty straightforward. And can we talk about actor interviews?
Yeah, sure. This is, be aware, folks, if you don't want to hear that, switch this off now or turn the volume off for 30 seconds. But yeah.
Yeah, Jonathan Pryce has, these actors always have to say something. So.
They can't resist, can they?
Jonathan Pryce has indicated that, the High Sparrow has sort of a comeuppance coming his way.
Maybe not this next episode, or is that what he said?
I'm not sure if it was directly this episode, but it was actually, it was last week that I read the article, and you can probably find it on the internet if
because I think we all expect that, but it's a big difference whether it happens next episode or say at the end of the season or something like that.
No, I think the context was more that this in this sort of upcoming chain of events, it was so I think it's maybe what it appears to be, and I felt like it kind of put the kibosh on our conspiracy theory.
Okay, well. So that's kind of an open-ended question right now. The trailer, it showed us some scenes, but it didn't show us anything that we can really say, oh, that's going to happen. It's just more teasing of what we kind of already know. So that'll be fun to see, though, even though we can't necessarily predict what's going to happen. As for some of the other plot lines that are important, I'm sure we're going to see more on the north, the Sansa and Jon stuff. That's still heading towards a conclusion. We'll probably see more on Rickon and Ramsay, but that's not in the trailer. But the big thing from this trailer, actually, before I get to the big thing, a little more of Arya. We're going to see some more of Arya, I take it. But here is something that's from previous trailers that matters. Well, apparently, Arya has been in more trailer scenes than we might think, which means she might be, in Faceless Man disguise in a trailer scene that we've seen, so we would have no idea it's her. Whoa. Time to rewatch all the preseason trailers, maybe, and guess, wait, is that Arya? Is that Arya? One of my best guesses is that we see a shot of Lord Walder Frey, like toasting his group, and then you see a shot of a bunch of Lannisters and Freys, like, having a banquet. What if Arya's in that shot? There's a ton of people in that shot. She could be like a serving girl or something like that, infiltrating the twins. So, we hardly talked about Blackfish and the Tullys that much. It's interesting. One thing that we could mention about that is that in the books, the Tullys, what happens is Jaime works out a deal with Edmure. He kind of goes around the Blackfish because the Blackfish is obstinate, but it's really Edmure who's in charge. So he said he makes a deal with Edmure because Edmure is actually Lord of Riverrun at the time, in de facto, in a sense. He outranks Blackfish, let's put it that way. And part of the deal is that Jaime pardons the garrison, lets them go. So maybe if something like that happens, then Sansa can get the River Lord that help. Because right now it seems like, Blackfish takes Riverrun back. How's he going to spare any men to go north? It seems like the Lannisters and the Freys would attack him or, besiege him. And we're probably going to see the siege of Riverrun as portrayed in the book. So I don't see him being able to send troops north, which might force Sansa into using the Vale Knights as we kind of expect she would have to. But they could both happen. Maybe she still uses the Vale Knights, but there's also an opportunity for some of these northern soldiers to come, or rather these Riverland soldiers to come north because Jaime lets them go. But that is pure speculation. There's nothing in the trailers or anything that indicates that that's going to come to fruition. It's only because we see it in the books. And I had watching her suggest that possibility to us as well. So that's good to see. So we'll see. But, of course, the big moment, the big thing in the trailers is big moment early in this preseason trailer. We see some guy or girl, it's not known, swinging a ball and chain that's on fire in a snowy landscape and smashing someone in the face. Now, that someone appears to be undead, as in the one getting smashed in the face, like it's one of the whites. But we had no clue who that other thing was. Of course, the guess is Cold Hands or Benjen. And now, well, we have scenes of Mira and Bran clearly still being chased. And then we have this scene. So it seems that they can't possibly escape on their own. Someone's going to save them. Looks like it's going to be Benjen. That's my guess. And to be very clear, Cold Hands is not Benjen in the books. It's been made. George has absolutely 100% confirmed it. There's an image going around on the internet. Well, it was going around on the internet for a while ago, which was the editor Anne Grohl, writing in the margin when she was editing A Dance with Dragons. She sees Cold Hands and says, Benjen? And, question mark, exclamation point. And George responds, no. Yeah. You can see him write in the margin, no. Yeah. So that's that. But the show can do what they want. The show doesn't need to introduce Cold Hands. They can just have Benjen be there, and just who cares about Cold Hands if you have Benjen doing what Cold Hands did, sort of. Yeah. So do you think maybe, Lady Gwyn, it's going to be Cold Hands? It's be kind of an inverse Cold Hands Benjen thing. Instead of him leading them safely to the cave, he's going to lead them safely out of the north.
Yeah, I think that seems likely. I mean, obviously, Bran and Mira got away, but it's clear they're going to need help. They're not going to, one girl dragging a boy on a sledge through the snow being chased by an army of undead are not going to get away on their own.
Especially with that mark on him. Apparently they just know where he is at all times.
Like a magnet, so they'll just always be right there. And I think it's going to be Benjen. They're not going to introduce Cold Hands. The law of conservation of characters tells us they're going to bring back this character that we all already know about, although some people may have forgotten him because he's been gone a long time. But no, most people will know and remember Benjen. So that's who I think. And is he going to come, lead them back to the wall? Probably. And then we get to the point of we talked about earlier, where, does he lead him through the wall and then bad things happen? Does somebody figure it out and say, oh God, no, you can't go through the wall, bad things will happen?
It asks that, so I think we're pretty much of the same mind there, roughly, but it begs so many questions. First of all, this character, whoever he is, assuming it's Benjen, is riding a horse in this extreme north. So is this some sort of special, is this a dead horse? Or what the hell? How does he have a horse? And Benjen doesn't have his horse. Benjen's horse rode back to the wall in season 2 or season 1. No, in season 1, his horse shows back up.
Right. Remember that, the riderless horse.
So he doesn't even have his horse. So what is going on here? And where has he been this whole time? You guys had a theory like that maybe he was captured by the others because they want, his Stark blood is somehow meaningful, or, that there's that rumor that that Night King was a Stark himself.
Yeah,
so
I think
this is
boy talked about that. There's something special with the Stark blood and the others, I think.
Yeah. There's some sort of maybe distant connection. That might be a big reveal at the end of the series. Starks, the first, Night's King was a Stark. That's it's in the book pretty much. It's suggested. It's not confirmed. It's
one of those. They say this, they say that, but it could be something else. But
yeah. So, but I think most people are like, it was probably a Stark, especially because we're told it was a Stark that put him down too. And it's like, well, it was his brother or something like that, and the Starks, it's their duty, and this is maybe why the Starks take the Night's Watch so seriously. It's an ancient kind of thing going on there. So that's just all really, really, really cool. If Benjen does appear next week, it's going to be an explosion of comments and things again. Probably not as big as this week, but it'll be another just torrent of excitement. Being like, yeah, there's Benjen. And I'll be right there with you guys. I'll be cheering. I'll be yelling at the screen like, yeah, Benjen. Even though I kind of expect it to happen, I'll still be excited to see it actually happen.
Oh, yeah.
Loving that expectation turning into reality. So, worry of the week, though. I guess Benjen will save them both, but hopefully it's not just Bran and Mira bites the dust because, they've suffered enough, and Mira's cool. We like Mira. We hope that she continues to have a role. I'd like to see her do some more damage to the White Walkers. She's one of the few people to kill one now, right? John's killed one, Sam's killed one, and Mira's killed one. That's it. Boom, 3 people.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the 3 heads of the dragon. No, I'm just kidding.
That's it. Oh, yeah.
Amira, John, and Sam? What?
That
What happened to Danny?
Crackpots. Yeah, Danny. She's over in Marine taking what is hers. So
yeah, she's just gonna die. That's the other thing in the credits. Another very unrevealing thing in the trailer is Dario saying, "You're a conqueror," and Danny says, "I take what is mine." Well, we heard Danny say, "I take what is mine" several times. That doesn't really tell us anything.
That was just like, as usual. Okay.
Yeah, that's the most as usual moment possible right there. That's not a slam on Danny. I love Danny. That's just we've heard that line before.
Definitely.
But it is sort of telling, but it even though it isn't necessarily new, it is sort of telling, like Dario's painting her as someone who's conquering, which she doesn't. I don't think she likes that. I think she takes exception to that term, because in terms of the 7 kingdoms, it's like, well, I have a right to the 7 kingdoms, but Marine, I don't know about that. What right does she have to Marine? I mean, the right of freeing the slaves is cool. I'm down with that, but as far as her right to rule Marine, well, she's got the right of strength, that's for sure. Can't argue with power. Mm-hmm. The moral arguments are a little more complicated, but let's not bother with those. So yeah, worry of the week. Mira, what do you think? Do you think yes, no, or you think Benjen will save them both, or maybe?
I'd be a little worried about Mira a little bit. Hopefully she lives to fight another day. So just crossed at this point. I mean, let's face it, it looks pretty bad for both of them at the moment. We only, armored and plot, I would say, is Bran pretty strongly. So we'll have to see, I guess.
What about the remaining direwolves? They just keep dropping like flies.
I mean, if we haven't utterly forgotten Nymeria, that she still exists, I don't give her very good odds, or Ghost there, and now we're just imagining that he's there, because I think they're all falling, like you alluded to, they're all falling victim to budget. So we're doing away with direwolves. Maybe we'll get more dragons out of it. Yeah,
I mean, the show budget has gone up every year, but so has their expense. In season 1, they had the lowest budget, but they didn't have dragons except for that one little final scene. And they used dogs for the direwolves. They didn't even use CGI wolves. They used actual dogs. So the costs have gone up dramatically. Now they have adult dragons. They have white walkers. They have children of the fort. They have all these prosthetics. They have huge battles to do. Yeah, the budget's gone up, but so has the overlay. So, what are you going to do? So, sorry, direwolves. Doesn't look good. But yeah, it's weird because Nymeria, in the books, we see how she could come back into the plot because Arya's, skin changing. So you can see that developing, but she's not skin changing at all in the show. Maybe it's not too late. Maybe she'll go back when she goes back to Winterfell, to Westeros. She'll start having a connection to Nymeria again. Mm-hmm. But I almost feel like they won't do that, and Nymeria maybe just won't come back at all. But it's such a nice loose end for them to get back to. I don't know.
Maybe they'll have some sort of reconnection. If she goes to that area, there could be this kind of reunion thing. But because they're not wargs in the show, so it would just be like long lost pet sort of. I don't know if they'll bother with it. But.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the good thing there is if they don't bother with it, then Nymeria is safe. She will not die.
Right. She will live in our hearts forever, roaming the Riverlands.
Yeah, we'll always be here. We'll always have Nymeria.
Right.
So I don't really have anyone for the armored and plot. I don't know if anyone else we can add to that list. I don't think anything has changed there. Maybe I'm missing someone, but it seems like that's all stayed the same. We already took Dario kind of off the list temporarily, so that's good. And Jorah's off doing his thing. He's probably not going to die. Being sent off on a solo quest is usually good for your chances, I think, at least in the short term. So I don't think I have anyone new for this list. We didn't rate the episode. Let's finish with a 1 to 10 rating. I'm gonna give it an 8.5. I'll go first this time, and I just no qualification, just give it an 8.5. Emotional, powerful, and just how much discussion it generated. I love that part. What about you?
I'm gonna go a little higher than you.
Cool.
This is the first time, so I'm gonna say 8 and 8.75. Can we do that? Can we do half a?
Sure.
Okay. And when I first watched it, I would have been actually closer to a 9, but after I watched it a second time, I thought, it's not really quite, because every single one wasn't all that strong, but it was still very, very powerful and solid and everything.
I almost had to, I always rewatch it. I've seen it 4 times now, but I almost like at the end of it, I was like, wait, what else happened? This final scene just dominated so much. Like, wait, what else happened in this episode? Wait, there was a King's Mood, wasn't there?
Yeah, that's probably why I was initially, I was like, that was a 9. And then when I thought about it some more, I was like, well, it was, a couple other little things, but really it was really good. I think it's definitely one of the best in a very, very long time.
Yeah, and I think it's either 3rd or 4th rated all time as far as IMDb rankings. Yeah, and of course those things tend to, they tend to drop a little bit, especially when they're such a high point. But it's ahead of Blackwater. It's ahead of some of the others. It's not ahead of The Red Wedding, or The Reigns of Castamere is the actual name, and it's not ahead of Hard Home. Those are both 9.9s, so probably won't be it's probably going to stay behind them. It probably won't go up, but it may be able to hold that 3rd spot until maybe more episodes come along the season to knock it back down, because this season is really just churning out the hits.
Yeah.
Whether you like them or not, you can't deny that they've been highly rated by the fans and by critics. So there's that. That's just the showrunners hate the game, hate the players, but you can't deny the success. I don't hate the game or the players. I'm loving it. I'm happy. So let us say goodbye for this week. Very good discussions. Very happy that we were able to do so much and talk about so many things that are fun. We were able to relate things to the book so much. This season, it has sometimes been a challenge for us to relate some of these show plots to the books because they're so far off in their own direction. But this one, we really got back in there and really able to delve into some really deep, difficult topics that have been questions for up to 20 years, literally. 19 plus, we'll say, because we're not quite to the 20-year anniversary of the release of Game of Thrones, but we're really close. It's August 1996 will be the 20-year anniversary. So thanks again, Lady Gwen. Thanks again, Yolkboy, for contributing. Thanks as well to ASOIAF for contributing some good stuff that made it into this episode. Thanks to all the people that wrote in. Lots of good questions and comments made it into this episode from you all, watchers, listeners, watchers, YouTube, iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play, all that. Everybody's been really, really coming together as a community and helping us figure a lot of these things out. It's awesome. I love that aspect of our group as a community, that everybody works together to figure things out. It's really fun. So a lot more to go. We're only halfway through the season, so we'll be back next week with plenty more as we continue our awesome journey through season 6. Valar Morghulis. Hopefully Valar, see you at Balticon. And Lady Gwen, see you at Balticon. Yeah, I don't know if y'all caught that earlier. We'll all be meeting in real life for the first time ever. So that's going to be fun. That's something to look forward to in addition to all this awesome Game of Thrones stuff. We're going to get to watch the episode together on Sunday. There's a viewing at Balticon that we'll all be there for. That's going to be fun. And I'll be back to Atlanta just in time to record with Sean on Monday. So no worries, no impact to the schedule there. I might be a little tired, but I'm sure I'll be fired up to talk about Game of Thrones, as I always am. So Valar Morghulis, Valar Next Timus. See you guys, everybody.